talk about the evolving role of the manager, Loretta.
I haven't just got this to make me feel more important. It's so I could actually have hands free and still keep an eye on the time, because I used to work in radio and I like to talk. So keeping something to 15 minutes is quite tough these days. But thank you so much for sticking around. I kind of thought the closer it got to me starting to speak, who wants to hear about a manager? And kind of the vibe I got today is that mostly people were working in the industry and looking at the things of the future like data, which I found fascinating today, and the metaverse and all of those things. And then I was reminded that the reason all of us are here and have decided to work in music is because we love music, right? Even if you some days wonder, do I still love music? That was the thing that we all started with. And that comes down to the artist. We have no music without the artist. And I'm really pleased that the role I have now as a manager is one of the closest relationships that you can have with the artist. And unfortunately, in all the other moving parts that we need, and that infrastructure is great, sometimes you get further and further away from that artist and from that original meaning of, oh yeah, I love this. If we went around the room and asked everyone what their favourite song is or their favourite artist, some people would go, I love that, and others would be like, meh, they're all right. And I love that about music, that it's so subjective. But see, I'm already going off on a tangent. This is not on my notes at all. I'll try and bring it back. But one of the reasons that I used to get out of bed in the morning was because I absolutely loved music. And I've done pretty much a bit of everything. I remember being in my careers interview at 11, and the teacher said to me, Loretta, what do you want to do when you leave school? And I was like, oh, I'm going to be a singer. And I remember them putting their head on the side and going, let's think of a more realistic career, shall we? And I actually, in a way, had to agree with them. The percentage, like we've just heard, of people who will become a global superstar, which is what I wanted. I wanted to be on Top of the Pops, showing my age there. It's so, so small. And they explained to me that, like 2% of people are going to get that. And I remember leaving the room thinking, well, I'm going to be one of those 2% then, aren't I? And through a very wiggly line, I've managed to work in lots of different sectors. So I did go on to be a singer. I did get to be on Top of the Pops. I did work as a dancer. I worked as a radio host. I had my own live event. A podcaster. I also launched, co-founded a business with one of my artists, supporting and resourcing independent artists. And then finally, one of the artists, many artists that used to come to my Unsigned show, where I'd give them advice and say, you need to work with this producer, you need to do this, said, oh, I think you should be a manager. And I was like, no, I'm not a manager, I'm a creative. And then they were like, yeah, but you really like mentoring people and you really love helping people with their structure. And these amazing artists were coming into my studio with this music they've made. And I said, right, what's your plan? They'd be like, I don't know, we just made some music that we love. And I would feel so frustrated because they were so talented. So finally, with one artist, I said, look, I'm not your manager, but I'm going to help you with this one-off project. 7 years later, I'm still working with that artist. And I now manage 4 artists. I keep forgetting to do my clickery thingy. So this is the kind of thing we're going to talk about, which Chris wrote, which sounds really good, so I'd put it up there and to remind me to stick to the point. But in the past, and when I was a signed artist, when I was 19, many, many years ago, the holy grail for every artist was to be signed to a major deal. I'm so excited that I managed to follow the MMF and Beatbread, both of which I'm a massive fan of. The MMF have been really instrumental in my journey as a manager, and 2 of my artists have worked with Beatbread, so I can say it works, and they're really great. So they didn't tell me to say that. I didn't even know they were going to be on before me. But I remember when I was a young artist, I really, really thought to be signed was the thing. To be signed to a major is the only way I was going to be able to make a career out of this. And the old model, if you like, in the days when I was signed as a young teenager, your manager really, their role was about their contacts book and getting you meetings with the major labels. You'd do a showcase, and then you'd kind of be handed over to the record label who had their in-house team who would all work towards the success of this artist. The manager would then not take a step back, but their job was to manage the career, often playing the middleman between the artist and the label, and taking a bullet both sides, usually. And that's how it went. How things have changed these days is that that process, just like it was fantastic to hear Mark already putting that groundwork out there for me, has completely changed in this digital age, but also in the age of the independent artist, where many artists are not only choosing not to be signed to a major, but it's also not an option to them. For a long time, it's not been an option for many artists who, in my opinion, have a right to be an artist, have a right to get their music out there and to be enjoyed. And the great thing in this age of streaming is your tribe is out there to be found. Suddenly, after there being just 4 things on the menu, when there were gatekeepers with radio and with major labels, there's a million things. And you can find that, you know, if you are into drum and bass over bagpipes played on the Himalayas, you can probably find it, you know, you can find your tribe. It's all about being visible for that. So originally we had the artists in the middle, we had all of these teams. One of the biggest things that has changed is that the manager will have a closer journey for longer at that development stage with the artist. And in order to do that, you kind of have to play all of these roles. When I even think about, I don't know if it's my next slide or not. So you've got to have a basic knowledge of all these different roles. You need to do everything from booking a tour. I've even drawn up legal contracts and things for my artists. I've designed merchandise. I've made the T-shirts physically. I've driven the van. All of these things I've done. And traditionally, you might have somebody else who can do those. Managers have always done those things, but it's often for a lot longer. And because of that, they're even investing their own money at the point, often, when nobody else can believe in this artist. I'm a big fan of data, showing you where things are working, but way before the data stage, where managers are working with an artist purely because they believe in them, and usually alongside a full-time or part-time job, then that really is the only team member of the artist, the only person who's telling them that they can do this, and that relationship in that capacity goes on for a lot longer. So after signing a label, the label will sometimes take over some of these roles, as I mentioned before, and the manager will steer those, but there's a lot of people helping to hold that weight. So if you decide not to get signed, or if you decide, well, actually this isn't for me, then you still need those things to be done. So the manager might be finding a team for you who will be your PR team, your legal team, all of those, but they're always going to be that go-between for them. When I started managing in 2015, as I said, I'd had the experience in live, in radio, and all of those things. I remember, like probably a lot of people in the music industry, having a lot of imposter syndrome and like, I can't manage. It just sounded so, you know, I've not done a degree in music management. Funny enough, when I was at school, there wasn't a degree in music management. Now you can actually do that. And it wasn't until I started actually doing it and just thinking in the way that I always had, giving artists advice and just looking at how they could do a great campaign and introducing them to great people who could help to further them. And just because I believed in them so much that I would speak to anybody about my artists, I genuinely was passionate about their music. It's only now when I look back that all the different roles that I'd done in my journey in the music industry had perfectly prepared me for what it means to be a music manager today, knowing I knew what it felt like to be an artist. I'm so glad that in many of the talks today we've heard about the issue of mental health coming up, because I think that is such a huge, huge issue. It's not just a buzzword, it's not just a trendy thing. Back when I was touring when we were 19, it all seemed so glamorous. You didn't want to say if you were struggling because you're off on tour. I get to sleep on a bus that's actually moving along while I'm asleep. I was so excited about that when I was 19 because I'd never been on a plane in my life, and then suddenly I was in 26 countries. But at the same time, the idea of being completely isolated, of having this crazy lifestyle of performing in an arena and then going back to shop at Sainsbury's when you get home and all your friends have moved on, and having kids and all of that kind of thing, that's a lot to deal with. It's a weird life and it's a weird kind of pressure. So that artist-manager relationship is even more important now that we at least have the freedom to talk about the mental health issues and pressures as well. Sometimes I feel like I'm a parent to my artists. Sometimes I feel like I'm their counselor. Sometimes I'm their legal advisor. All of these things are equally important, as well as me creating opportunities for them. I told you I'm a big fan of the MMF. I was fortunate enough to be on the first year that the MMF ran their accelerator program for music managers, and it was a real defining year for me, because that was the year that I took the leap to go full-time as a music manager. So I went from working at the radio station part-time to full-time. Unbeknownst to me, that was at the end of 2019, not knowing what was coming up and the world was going to fall apart the next year. But funnily enough, when I look back, I think if I knew what was coming, I would never have been brave enough to take that step. And just where I see my artists all the time taking risks for the thing that they love, I knew I needed to put both feet in. Well, the Music Managers Forum did an amazing report. I really encourage you to go and see the full thing. You can look on their website, which is the mmf.net. It's called Managing Expectations. And they've highlighted a few issues that really talk about how the role of the manager has changed today. Now, again, I was so glad to hear that we've covered diversity today. When I was on the first year of the Accelerator program, I think there was only one other female who wasn't white other than me. And now I know on the Accelerator program last year, I think they had about half. So that's just it since 2019. That's a really amazing reflection of things beginning to change. Not only are managers more diverse, but also artists as well. As I already mentioned, managers aren't just looking after people's artists recording and publishing businesses. They're also doing all of these other things. You need to know about social media. You need to know about PR and promotion. You need to know about tour management and all of these other things as well. That is normal for the manager today, whereas it wasn't necessarily in the past as involved as that. Also, investing your own money as well. That's something that many managers do. And also your time. There were many times when I was doing my full-time job and then I'd be on my laptop until midnight working for my artists with no income for a very long time. Most managers aren't earning a lot of money or even any money. In fact, I think I've got a stat on that coming up next. Oh, I went too fast. There we go. So 26% of respondents work full-time or part-time in another part of the business. 25% earn more than the national average, but 56% earn less than £10,000. And if you think about how key that manager role is, particularly today, that's got to be just for the love, isn't it? I don't think anyone becomes a music manager to get rich. I certainly didn't. But I do absolutely love it. It does remind me how important music is. It does remind me that I believe in what my artists have to say. I'm fortunate enough to manage 4 artists that I really believe have something bigger to say than their music. And we need reminding of that. Every revolution that's ever been, every amazing thing that's happened in the world, music has been at the driving force of that. And as much as I love to hear about how things are moving forward with data and all of these things, we, as managers, we have to be a part of that and keep up with those new things. It's really important to remember the power of music and what that's about as well. So the MMF identified these 5 kind of pain points, if you like. Finance is a big one. That's why I think it's fantastic that more and more people are looking for innovative responses to the problem of there being one route before. That's why I'm a big fan of companies such as Beatbread, and there's more and more coming through. Mental health provision is so important. Yes, sometimes, there's the joke that when an artist has a really hard time, we're going to get a great album out of it. Certainly my artists produce some really great lockdown albums out of their pain through that time. But at the same time, it's really important that we keep these conversations going. We all turn to music when we're having a hard time. It's just what we do. But we do need to remember the artists that produce that music as well. Diversification of skills is just something that's a part of being a manager these days. Transparency of income streams is something that I know the MMF in particular are really helping to encourage a lot of the majors and a lot of these big players to just be transparent about the deals that they're making behind the scenes, to make sure that artists really are being rewarded for the work they're doing. Again, coming back to that point that we just don't have a music industry without them, so we need to make sure we value them. And finding the same with revenues and new commercial models as well. All of these new ways of doing things, I'm excited about, because we need to make sure that music can continue. We need to make sure that it's feasible for a kid who's 10, like me, when I was at school, to say, I want a career in music. I didn't see anyone who looked like me certainly not being a manager. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do. But the more we can have examples of that and make sure it's accessible for everyone, that level playing field that Charisse was talking about earlier, then I'm excited about the future, even with the challenges. I feel like I had so much more to say, and I'm sure there's many managers that you would speak to that might have a different experience for me, but at the moment, I'm really positive about the future, as you can hear, and I know that there's some real challenges, but I think if we'd be really real about them and come back to what music's about and how powerful it is, then it's a bright future ahead. Thank you.